things I'm asked about a lot is how do I throw strikes where I'm not giving it away, where I'm doing it where it's non-telegraphed. And this is an important thing because unlike sport fighting or boxing, kickboxing, whatever, in a real self-defense situation, the element of surprise is critical. You don't have a referee with rules and people, setting it up where you got to go all through these different rounds. So you want to be able to get the first couple shots off as quickly as possible. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to give it away, right? All warfare, as Sun Tzu said, is based on deception. So you want to learn to become deceptive. So if you look at the down and dirty and also the fast hands, course, I get into how you move your body appropriately, because a big part of throwing non-telegraphed strikes is learning to not wind up or chamber before you strike. And the reason is, anytime I'm throwing a strike and I pull back to throw the strike, I'm giving it away. Now, I know in karate, kung fu, and even boxing, we're taught to chamber strikes. We're taught to do all these different things. The problem with that is when you're doing it static and I chamber and pull my arm back, I'm creating unnecessary space. And then in a real fight, if the guy's just bum rushing, I may not have time to get that off because I've given it away. So how you do it is, first, you want to really practice learning how to move your body. So one of the things I always get people to do is stand with their feet relatively shoulder width apart, bend their knees slightly, and then learn how to shift their weight forward. And when you're practicing this on your own, what you want to do is you want to concentrate on feeling it in the legs and in the feet as you're pushing back and forth, trying not to rock forward or backward, but just kind of shifting your weight forward a little bit. You don't need a lot of movement. Notice as I'm going forward, I'm pushing from the rear leg. When I want to return, I'm pushing back. So as I'm pushing from the rear leg, there's also some deceleration in the forward leg, and then I push back and then there's deceleration in the rear leg. This is not a hard thing to do, but you got to practice it because you got to habituate the ability and the experience. So what I want you to do is, I want you to go ahead, stand with your feet roughly shoulder width apart, slight bend in the knees, bring your hands up like you mean to use them, and I want you to push and feel yourself pushing back and forth, and it should feel nice and smooth in the hips, and you should be feeling the legs push. So what I want you to do now is, I want you to go ahead, pause the video, and practice this for about a minute, 2 minutes, however long that you feel you need to, just to get this feeling. And as you're moving back and forth, this is smooth. Make sure you're also switching your feet and shifting where you have each leg, going back and forth where you're doing it on both sides, because in a real fight, there's no such thing as, whether I'm a southpaw, whether I'm a righty, in a real fight, wherever the fight is where you got to fight from. So you want to practice that. So go ahead, pause the video, and let's go ahead and do that. Now, once you've gotten the feel for that, what you're going to do is you're going to bring your hands up. I'm going to show it from a right lead. I really don't care whether it's a left lead, right. I'm actually right-handed. It makes no difference to me. And the reason is, in a fight, both your arms are equal in a real fight. I mean, unless, I'm not asking you to do calligraphy with your non-dominant arm. I'm just asking you to extend your arm and punch people. But notice one of the things I'm going to do here, and this is important. As I'm moving, my arm does not move before my body. A lot of times people go like this with the arm and you're giving it away. Understand that the person you're dealing with, any movement you make, he's tracking that movement. So the movement you make, whether my body moves first or my arm moves first, whatever his reaction time is, that's what's going to cue him in that he needs to respond some kind of way. So by moving the arm first, now I trigger his panic reflex. Now he's going to move. Now I made it harder for myself. But if my body's already moving, even though my arm didn't move, I can get there and still deliver with force because of the fact that I'm now cutting out unnecessary preparatory movement to give it away. One of the things I want to point out, I got to say it, and that is, people look at boxing or they look at kickboxing, and by the way, I'm a fan of these things, and I've done both of them. Not professionally, but I've done both of them. And one of the things people do not understand is boxing is a sport, kickboxing is a sport, Muay Thai is a sport. And when you see a boxer, rotating his body, and people teach, you want to really get the body behind it. The truth is, you actually don't need to move your body as much as we've been taught. And the reason is, all human movement has an arcing, rotational kind of movement to it. All of our joints, the way they work, there's a rotation. As I throw a punch here, you can see my arm is actually rotating naturally, even though I'm throwing a straight punch. So I don't need a lot of movement. My hips, in order for this to be smooth, have to move. My shoulder has to move forward. If I'm just doing this, even if I'm just doing this, there's still this rotation going on. And of course, there are other muscles that are working in the opposite direction to help with that. So as you're doing this kind of stuff, just bear in mind, there's always this built-in rotation. What you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize unnecessary rotation. It doesn't mean I never rotate my hips, but when I rotate my hips, I'm rotating more, not necessarily to generate power because I can already do that, but as I'm rotating, sometimes I need a little more extension. And people who say that, well, you really got to rotate your hips in order to strike with power, I see people in boxing, knock people out with jabs all the time. Right? There's not a lot of rotation here versus here. So don't tell me people can't do it. As long as at the point of impact, you have the structural alignment, you're good to go. So what I do is, I'm going to stand like this, and I just bring my hands up. And all I'm going to do is just a straight vertical fist. You can rotate the fist over, it doesn't matter. Or you can use a palm strike, it doesn't matter. What's important you want to practice is, first, moving your body without the hand moving. Just like that. So let's go ahead, pause the video once again, and I want you to just go ahead and practice this. And after you've done it for like a minute or two, then go ahead and restart the video where you're going to be starting from this position. So now that you've practiced that a little bit, and you got your hips moving, and now you know how to move with your hand not moving, the next thing you're going to do, very slowly at first, you're going to start pushing and shifting the body forward. And you're going to start right after a little bit of the movement of the body. You're going to start just touching, just touching, just touching, just touching. Trying to the best of your abilities to not over anticipate when you need to accelerate into the strike, because you're going to build up to that. But what we're doing is we're just building that muscle memory in, so that as I'm doing this, this becomes a smooth, seamless habit, whereas I don't have to think about it. And as I'm doing this, what I'm doing is I'm feeling from my feet all the way through my hips and my shoulders, all the way through my arm. I'm feeling this smooth, even movement. I don't want any tension or unnecessary tension, because then that puts the brakes on my action. Once you've done that enough times, then you want to start adding speed and power and snap. And what you're trying to do as you're building it up is you're trying to work the timing so that when from the time you push to the time your hand goes out, it strikes like a cobra striking. Then you want to build power into it. And you want to be able, as you're building power into it, some people say, when you hit, you want to snap your hand back. And that does work. I like Bruce Lee's definition. And Bruce Lee said, when you're throwing a strike and you're hitting at the point of contact, you want to feel like you're suddenly grabbing a bar. And I like that because that kind of sensation in your hand is exactly what your hand does when you hit. But it also ensures you form a proper fist so you don't end up injuring your doggone hands. No sense in making the bad guy's job easier in the fight, right? So as I'm doing this, I'm shifting, and then I want to get to the point where I can just explode into the bag. So from here, pushing from the roof, I just let it happen. And I keep practicing that because I'm focusing on not so much the power, but the timing. The power comes. The power is actually the easy part. The hard part is the timing of ensuring that 90% of the force is being generated from your legs and not from your arms. You want your arm relaxed so that the muscles in your arms are available for you to snap it in. So go ahead now and stop the video and go ahead, practice that, build it up, take as much time as you need, and then once you've done that, I'll kind of close it out. But you coming back and I'll close it out. Okay, so to kind of summarize it, again, when you're practicing this skill, You want to really concentrate on getting into the habit of not moving your arms before you move your body. Always remember, your hands will always catch up to your body. Always, but not the other way around. Everybody's hands, relatively speaking, at close range, pretty much about the same in terms of speed. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people who aren't exceptionally fast. What I'm saying is, at close range, pretty much everybody's about the same speed, relatively speaking. In other words, we've all played tag, so you know when you were a kid and you played tag, you know, the first thing you did was you actually moved your body before you tagged, because you knew if you just stood there and tagged, they'd tag you back. So you want to kind of keep that idea in mind. Eventually, you start learning how to mix it up with different movement, mix it up, different types of strikes. One point I want to make, and that is, when you're striking, if you're in a self-defense situation, once you strike, as the hand comes back, one of the things you can do is I strike, and as the hand comes back, I step in. And the reason is, obviously, I got to pull my hand back in chamber to some degree. But if I just pull it back from here, now I create all this space. So what I want to do is, as I strike, as it chambers back, instead of me pulling my hand back like this, I'm going to actually almost like I'm pulling my body forward. Everybody see that? And when I'm doing that, what I'm doing is I'm actually closing the distance between myself and the other person, not creating unnecessary space, but also I'm putting my arm in the position it needs to be in as if I did this anyway, because the strike only has power in the direction it's going. So as I pull my arm back and I throw the strike, that's fine. But if I pull myself forward and I step forward, I'm in the same position as I would be throwing the strike anyway. And it cuts down on the amount of time it just takes. Doesn't mean that there still isn't a little delay in there. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that I'm doing the best I can to eliminate unnecessary space to give them time to get back in the fight. Remember, we're talking about something that's going to happen in a couple seconds in a real self-defense situation. We're not talking about, the best 2 out of 3. We're not talking about playing kickboxer. We're not talking about a movie. We're talking about fighting for your life. Hey, I want to thank you for checking out the video. I have a lot of fun doing these kind of things, and I'm going to be doing more of this stuff. And if you like what you see, make sure you hit the button below and subscribe to the channel.